All right, welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. We are in this TMS series, and I'm excited to talk about diagnosing TMS. It's probably a big question on your mind. How do I know if my symptoms that I've been dealing with are TMS? And if you're asking that question, you are definitely looking in the right direction. You're definitely, opening your mind to what I see and understand as the truth of your multidimensional being and the manifestation and experience of symptoms, disease, and health in your body. So good on you for at least considering with that open mind that maybe my symptoms, what I'm dealing with, might be TMS. So in future episodes, I do want to talk about all the different potential symptoms that could be a TMS. And short story is that it can be literally anything. Of course, Dr. Sarno is well known for his book, Healing Back Pain. And the focus of his early work was all about back pain specifically, and then other sorts of musculoskeletal complaints. And that was in the early days of TMS, Tension Myositis Syndrome. That was TMS. However, later in his career, of course, he started to see how so many other things can be manifested in the physical body that fit the same TMS patterns. So, again, short story is anything, any symptom under the sun, any feeling, any experience in your body can be the result of the mind body syndrome or tension myositis syndrome. Um, so, uh, so how do you figure out if your symptoms are in fact for sure TMS? Well, you go to the doctor and say, "Hey, can you test me for TMS?" Right? Like, "Hey, can you just, run this blood test? Can you just do this little MRI, CT scan or something like that and just tell me, hey, this is TMS?" That would be great. That'd be great if we could have that sort of definitive diagnosis, but we can't. We don't, and we can't. And that's because we are more complex than just the physical, um, biochemical processes, the anatomical or biochemical physiologic processes. We are more complex than that. And I do need to just talk about the whole world of diagnoses in conventional as well as alternative or functional medicine. Diagnoses really only exist for one purpose, and that purpose is billing insurance to collect money for the treatment and services that are in the best case scenario, helping you to heal. But let's face it, in our current state of affairs, the conventional medical system really doesn't care about you healing. It cares about you just maintaining that, hamster wheel of having a diagnosis and treating the diagnosis, treating the symptoms related to your diagnosis. So, anyways, that being said, TMS, tension myositis syndrome, is not a real diagnosis, quote unquote. It doesn't really exist in the whole conventional medical world. There are tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of different diagnoses. These are, diagnostic codes that are billable once again for insurance companies. And also these diagnoses exist so that different doctors and healthcare providers can communicate, with one another with a common language, albeit a very limited and reductionistic language. It can be useful to communicate and say, "Oh, patient so and so, SIBO," and and then it's like, okay, based on my limited worldview, this patient has these symptoms that are related to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, for example. So there are some uses for diagnoses, but like I said, when it comes to our world or the conventional medical world, TMS is not a diagnosis, even though, ironically, it is at the root of, once again, virtually every symptom and experience of health or disease that someone may experience. So the question remains, how do you truly know if your symptoms are a result of TMS? And There's not a clear, measurable way to assess this and to for sure assess this. However, that being said, it is very important that you have the total and complete confidence in the underlying process of TMS being at the root of your experience of symptoms and disease. So it's kind of paradoxical, right? We need to trust the diagnosis. We need to be all in and accepting this diagnosis. And this diagnosis is impossible to actually grasp and measure. So that leaves us again in this state of kind of questioning. Naturally, that's what we all do is we question, is this really TMS? So in talking about the diagnosis of TMS, I think we also have to talk about what you are probably being told from your conventional provider or your naturopathic doctor or your functional medicine doctor. They're probably telling you that something is physically wrong with you because you have had some imaging done and say, oh, you've got, spinal stenosis, and that's why you've got, upper cervical pain or whatever it is. Or, hey, yeah, you've got, a high TSH, so you've got some hypothyroidism. So that's probably why you've got this chronic fatigue kind of thing going on. It can your symptoms can have literally infinite causes in the biomedical world, and that those all of those potential anatomical anomalies or biochemical imbalances may indeed really exist, and they are, as I like to remind people, they are just snapshots in time. They aren't like capturing the whole holistic picture of your dynamic, self-healing, multidimensional organism that you are. And underlying all of these biochemical processes and the fluctuations that are always taking place, bringing you into balance and out of balance, and having that resilient and dynamic effect related to your experience of presence in your natural world. Like the thing that is ever present and consistent is the ever-changing nature of your body, of your mind, and of these processes that are creating health or disease. So even though you're being told that, hey, these symptoms are a result of this lab value being out of range, this inflammation marker, the breakdown of cartilage in this joint or the inflammation in that joint, all those things might be true. However, the symptoms, your feeling of your pain or your symptoms are not a result of that. The feeling of the pain and the symptoms that you are experiencing are only a result of your thinking and your perception of what's going on. So those anatomical findings on an X-ray or MRI, or those lab tests that might be measured by some doctor or health provider, they are real. Like, they are real, but they are not the actual cause of your symptoms. They may correlate with your symptoms, but they do not cause the symptoms. And the evidence for this is simply the fact that all sorts of people exist in the world who have similar anatomical, anomalies, whether it be, again, inflammation in a joint, or, spinal stenosis, or a herniated disc, or whatever it might be. All sorts of people are walking around in the world completely pain and symptom free with these things going on. And similarly, there's all sorts of people who have, high TSH and quote unquote hypothyroidism, whose energy levels are just fine, or who, don't have, fill in the blank physical symptom. It can, again, literally be anything. Let me see what comes to mind for me is what I have dealt with. Most recently, I shared my experience healing quote unquote EBV, chronic or some chronic fatigue kind of symptoms related to a reactivation of quote unquote EBV. And I say quote unquote EBV because, yes, that laboratory test was measured and my EBV titers were elevated. But I know that probably my EBV titers were elevated before I was experiencing the symptoms. And I'm sure that my EBV titers were also elevated after the resolution of those symptoms. So, sure, maybe the symptoms were in some way correlated, but my experience and the feelings that I had when going through those, in my case, the chronic fatigue sort of symptoms and the low energy and the weakness and the blah, and there were other things going on, but those symptoms were not directly caused by the quote unquote EBV that was measurably elevated in my bloodstream. Those symptoms were a result, I know they were a result of tension myositis syndrome, which, yeah, maybe you could, as we talked about before in the how does TMS manifest, maybe you could draw some connections between the metaphysical experience and nature of the mind and the emotions and the spiritual elements and factors of our being and how they influence our physiology and immune system and detox pathways and nervous system. Like maybe you could draw those connections, but the fact remains that the underlying root cause is that psychological, emotional, mental, metaphysical process of TMS, as we talked about, as we described in previous episodes, or tension myositis syndrome, otherwise it's called mind-body syndrome. And I'll again take advantage of this opportunity to just say, I don't like the term TMS. I don't like the term mind-body syndrome because it is totally universal. Nothing's wrong with you. You are just a normal, healthy, functional human being who is gaining greater sensitivity to these fundamental processes that are, again, universal and present amongst every single human being. And the fact that you experience these things doesn't mean that you are weak or less than anyone who doesn't experience these things. In fact, I would argue it means that you are stronger and more sensitive in a good way to the feedback that you're experiencing and receiving from being present in your life, in your world. So anyways, back to this question, how to diagnose TMS, because it is very important that we are able to diagnose within ourselves, hey, I'm experiencing this, and this that I am experiencing is for sure, definitively a result of this underlying phenomenon, the mind-body syndrome, tension myositis syndrome. Despite the fact that these sort of anatomical structural findings may exist, or these sort of lab values may be out of balance or inflamed or this or that, those things may be present. And despite that, my diagnosis is not hypothyroidism, is not, high inflammation markers, is not Epstein-Barr virus reactivation. Is not, spinal stenosis, is not, arthritis of the knee joint or the hip joint. Those things, yes, those things exist. But my diagnosis and what is fundamentally the cause of my experience of symptoms is TMS. It's very important that we firmly stand within ourselves and embrace and acknowledge and accept this diagnosis. And it's only when we're able to do that that we start the true healing process, because otherwise we're just chasing the elusive physical biomedical diagnosis, and we're playing whack-a-mole trying to find things and fix things in the physical plane when it's really the metaphysical, mental, emotional, spiritual plane that needs to be addressed. So I've talked for 14 minutes here, and I haven't really even started to unpack how to diagnose TMS. So really it has to do with ruling out things. We want to rule out the real kind of dangerous processes that could be going on in the body. In other words, we want to make sure that we don't have a broken bone like that. That is a cause of pain and symptoms. That is not TMS. A cancerous process, a tumor impinging affecting your organs, how your organs are functioning, or of course how you're maybe impinging your spinal cord. Well, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling for words here. But anyways, there are like real processes that can be going on um, that need to be kind of like cleared from our consciousness and kind of ruled out. Okay, I don't have this. So it kind of narrows down. Yeah, again, these other structural anomalies may exist, but my experience of my pain and symptoms, and I would also even argue that even in the case of tumors, even in the case of these malignancies, and maybe even in the case of like an acute injury, I don't know about a broken bone, but definitely like a sprain, strain kind of thing. Our like those things exist. Those injuries exist. Those acute traumas and real measurable masses in the body, they exist, but our experience of the symptoms that experience is generated from our psychological, mental, emotional, multidimensional process. um, there are people who maybe heard stories of people who like break their leg and they like just go about their day, and then it's like, okay, time goes on, and then they realize they've got a broken leg and they've been walking on it for the last few weeks. Those kinds of things exist because it's just proof that like our experience, again, the felt experience that we have in our body is complex and weird and strange. And the underlying root cause of anything is the mental, emotional, deeper metaphysical dimension of who we are. So, anyways, yeah, we do want to rule out some of these things that can be and should be treated for sure. Um, and the other sort of real tall tale sign of is my experience TMS is really what I like to, or not what I like to call it, but I do like to call it, but it was really Dr. Sarna who coined the term the symptom imperative. In other words, we kind of reflect on our life and all of the symptoms and conditions that we've experienced, and we see that there's kind of this trend. There's kind of this trend of, maybe it's back pain, and then maybe we get a cold or flu, quote unquote, like kind of an acute thing, and our back pain goes away, and then we've got this like congestion, and then maybe okay, we heal that, and then maybe we've got like some chronic fatigue that settles in, and then okay, our energy gets better, but maybe then we start having some knee pain, and we have trouble walking, and okay, like that kind of works itself out in some period of time, but then we start manifesting gastrointestinal sort of symptoms, constipation or bloating or something like that. And then it's like, okay, I've got this, other diagnosis, but the pain's gone. So I'm dealing with my stomach pain, and then the stomach pain kind of goes away. And we've got like heart palpitations, and then like the heart palpitations, we focus on that, and that kind of works itself out, and we get treated for that. And then we've got anxiety, and it can be anything. It can be any sort of physical symptom or condition. And it, as you can also see in my example here, it can be kind of a psychological symptom that we experience. And the underlying cause of all of these things is, you guessed it, TMS, the mind body syndrome. So that symptom imperative is really TMS at work, trying to find a way to manifest and make itself seen and felt and experienced. And again, the reason for this that we kind of talked about in a previous episode, the reason why we experience TMS is so that we focus on something physical, or in some cases psychological, so that we are distracted from the real deeper emotional. And I even, yes, it is emotional stuff, but it's more like deeper unconscious existential stuff that is beyond our awareness, right? It's not like, oh, I'm emotionally stressed because of this relationship or this professional scenario. It like those things can exist, but it's really the deeper unconscious issues that are more like existential in nature that are the underlying cause of this mind body syndrome. So it's probably not the real clear black and white answer that you were hoping to find. How do I know if my symptoms are TMS? And even though there's not a black and white measurable test to definitively diagnose TMS, I'm here to tell you that your symptoms, if you're listening to this, your symptoms are a result of TMS, because 99.999% of symptoms have an underlying metaphysical, mental, emotional, spiritual process that is really at the root of your experience of dis-ease, pain, symptoms in your body. So good on you for being open to that and looking in that direction. And your process of healing, now that you kind of see that, now that you are embracing that and accepting that and moving in that direction, now the next step really is to keep moving in that direction. Don't let yourself be swayed from all of these other things that might also be potentially correlated with your process. Like I was talking about, the other lab tests, whether it be like heavy metal toxicity or, SIBO or hormone imbalance or inflammation, this or this sort of thing or that sort of thing. Like, yes, those things are real. Those things, yeah, can be important to address and assess, but they are not the fundamental root cause of your experience of pain, symptoms, and disease in your body. And that doesn't mean that you don't want to do anything about them. Like if you are toxic with heavy metals, like you want to address that and you want to support your body in detoxifying and eat clean and remove toxins from your household. But you want to do so while also completely trusting and accepting and embracing the true diagnosis that, again, is not conventionally appreciated or even acknowledged, but that true diagnosis of tension myositis syndrome, the mind body syndrome. And it's hard. It's hard to have one foot in this world, like TMS world, and one foot in this world, the functional medicine or conventional medicine world. That's why, in my personal experience, I've got to go all in. I've got to kind of stop like testing things, stop going to a chiropractor, stop going to acupuncture. I got to completely, take myself out of that world so that I can be fully committed and invested within myself in the truth, in the direction of the truth, which is the world of mind, body, fundamental, foundational healing. So let's see if I covered all the bases here. Again, it's not as black and white as maybe you're led to believe, or maybe you would hope to have believed. But it is the fact that TMS, even though it's not a real diagnosis, it is 99.999% at the root of all conditions and experiences that you might have in your body. And I would really, urge you to consider maybe even doing like a practice of like reflecting on your past and your experience of health over the course of your entire life, or maybe when you quote unquote got sick, when things kind of slid in an unhealthy direction. What have been all of the symptoms that you have dealt with? Maybe it has just been digestive stuff. Maybe there were some, neck pain and back pain and knee pain and hip pain and, toe pain and foot pain or headaches. And like, was it this and that? Like, go back and just reflect on all of these things. And you'll probably see that there was always this symptom imperative at play. That's, again, the purpose of TMS, to distract you from really what's going on, that core, deep, existential, deep, unconscious, emotional stuff that is hard to acknowledge and feel. And it's so much easier and more socially acceptable to experience and express physical symptoms in our world today. So that's how we diagnose TMS. We, take the leap of faith and we trust this process, and we acknowledge that this is a universal, completely normal, natural phenomenon that every human being experiences. And yes, that doesn't mean we completely turn a blind eye on the biomedical factors that are also happening and dynamically, going on within ourselves. It doesn't mean that we turn a blind eye on the anatomical and structural things that we can assess through imaging techniques and that sort of thing. But despite all of those things that are going on, we trust that we are multidimensional beings, and the underlying cause, the underlying process that leads to our experience of dis-ease in our body is the TMS phenomenon. So hopefully this is giving you a little bit of confidence, even though, again, it's not a black and white sort of thing. But if you're looking for more support, more confidence, more trust, and more direction as you're navigating this healing process, feel free to reach out. Feel free to go to www.alter.health and learn more about our services, about the services that I offer with TMS coaching, as well as the TMS Free Life course that I've created. Maybe it's for you. So if you are looking for more, that's where I'd urge you to go. And also stay tuned for future episodes where we're going to be unpacking and delving in to this mind-body phenomenon more deeply. All right. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next time. Peace and love.